Welcome back, you cosmic baddies. Welcome to Chakras and Cusswords. If you're new here, I welcome you. My name is Catherine, and I am your podcast host. So I just want to give a little brief introduction. I consider myself a little bit of an alchemist, a spiritualist, versus an astrologer. So if you're looking for a real astrology type podcast and reflection of this new moon, this might not be the right place for you. But if you're just looking for some new moon fun and some new moon energy, especially with the new moon in Gemini, you're in the right place. So we're diving in deep into this fresh, curious energy that the Gemini new moon brings. This illumination is our invitation to hit the reset button, to hit the areas of connection, communication, and to really show up in certain situations, especially in conversations. Not just to speak, but to truly listen. The Gemini reminds us of everything a little bit casual, social, and the energy around holding in the magic and letting the magic expel. I would say Geminis are a little chaotic. They're just a little crazy. I like them. With this energy, we have Mercury and Pluto showing up in this mix, and I kind of like it, Pluto's in Aquarius. Pluto is in Aquarius in a retrograde, so it's kind of giving us a little bit of an edge of calmness, kind of. And then we have a Mercury literally transitioning over to Gemini the day before this new moon energy takes its full course. So this new moon energy is happening in the sign of Gemini at 6 degrees, and it's also occurring on May 26th of 2025 at 11:02 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this energy is definitely different than the Taurus new moon that we just experienced as we close this cycle of that Taurus energy, reflecting from Taurus season, the lessons, the area of feeling more grounded, feeling more in tune to that space. We're making a transition. We're making a movement. We're making some energy. I feel like the new moon in Gemini is way more sociable. It's way more curious. It has this social flow that lets us make spaces and energies of connection. The new moon in Gemini, when I look at it as a whole, there's two things that really stand out to me. The energy of 6, as it is centered with the movement of the mutable signs, especially with the lower degrees. It's a baby moon. It's a baby. It's a little new moon baby. We just transitioned over to Gemini season, so this moon is feeling curious. It's feeling fresh. It's feeling youthful, where the other moons may have been feeling a little bit more fixed, a little bit more mature, but this new moon's kind of on this vibe of communication and this vibe of that Mercury element. We have to remember that Mercury is the energy of youth. People who have a lot of Mercury placements, or maybe they have a lot of connections with the planet of Mercury, we see that they kind of have this youthful appearance. They look filled with life, filled with thought, filled with information. Mercury is the energy of the planet of the Gemini, that area of intellectual well-being, the energy of wellness, and also the element of air is taking us by hold. That energy of feeling a little bit, I guess, I like to say Geminis are a little crazy. I've already said it once, but they're a little fucking kooky, okay? But they are so smart. You ever meet a fucking Gemini? They're wickedly smart, but they're like kind of crazy in some ways. And the people who like Geminis, they really fucking like them. And then the people who don't like Geminis are kind of like, They could be a lot of energy for some, right? That air element is a little bit more centered around new ideas, fresh thoughts, social exchanges. You get around an air sign and you're just kind of like, I'm exhausted. I feel like sometimes being around air signs, you're just like, okay, I hung out with you too much. This energy is feeling too intense and I need to like relax. And I feel it. I feel it. Considering my chart is like literally all air. Some of the things that really stand out with this new moon is the area of modality. It's a mutable sign. Mutables are known for being adaptable. They also like change. And of course, that energy of duality. That energy of duality just does not leave us with this new moon. The themes of this new moon is centered around communication, being more social, beginning new projects, being a little bit more consistent, reaching out to somebody you lost touch with. And I will say, if there's a friendship that is speaking to you, it could be subconsciously, maybe in your dreams, maybe in the energy of like this friend keeps coming back up in certain conversations or situations. And for whatever reason, there was like a fallout, or for whatever reason, it just like you guys lost contact. It might be a time for you to kind of like touch back up on that, kind of touch back up on that energy, especially also around like the energy of your social circles, also the energy around movement, with the area of possibly some of the areas of writing it out. A Gemini new moon to me feels like there's definitely some writing that takes place. There's definitely some writing. It could be journaling, it could be talking, it could be maybe talking out certain intentions. We have to remember that energy of Gemini kind of surrounds that third house. So sometimes that third house feels like you want to be practical, but you also want to get out certain things. You want to clear the air so these intentions are quite fine and well distributed. One of the things that stands out to me with this new moon is while we are being social, we're also going to pick up areas that kind of heighten that area of activity of the mind. So that could be signing up for a class, a paint class, reading a new book, or exploring a new topic, getting sociable. And we're going to talk about tips to get sociable, because if you're like me, sometimes you just cannot stand being sociable. You're like, okay, I need to get out. I need to go outside. I need to communicate with people outside of my small little circle of my family unit. I need to, go on a girls' night. I need to go out with my friends and maybe do a paint class, maybe do a spiritual class, maybe do some yoga. Because sometimes people can get really centered around in their area of comfortability, and meeting new people can be challenging. Also, this is a time that you really might feel like you're being pulled in two directions. And sometimes that's hard. I hate being pulled in two directions. And when you're being pulled in two directions, it's usually because you're being centered around a big decision or the energy around a path, right? And your curiosity might be coming forward where you're like, yes, I need to do this. Yes, I need to make this change. Yes, I need to create these intentions. Yes, I need to be so more focused. We could also feel a little scattered with this new moon, okay? It is a Gemini. What do we expect? Everything being root based? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Everything is air based here. Everything is centered around the energy of the mind, the energy of thoughts, the energy of movement of clouds. Everything might feel a little bit scattered. We might be overthinking some things. And also, talking with the area of real conversations and real depth is probably one of the most important things to do. Creating intentions that are really centered with that solar center, that soul's message, the message of the communicator, the message of wellness. Being a good communicator is a practice. Trust me, I fucking know. Also, during this time, we might feel like gossip could be coming to surface. And how do we deal with gossip? How do we deal with conflict? How do we deal with that surface level communication? Sometimes from people who are tapping deep into our chaotic energy and kind of tapping that emotional experience where you're like, oh, I really don't want to do this, or I really don't want to feel so vibrant, but that Gemini moon is kind of going to be enticing us to be a little bit centered with that chatty catty personality. So that is kind of a area that we're going to want to work on. Definitely the throat chakra is all engaged with this new moon. And we're going to really want to see our areas of analyzing might feel a little bit more stubborn in some aspects, because the Gemini, I feel like Geminis are a little like chaotic. A good Gemini, like a good Gemini, like somebody who's like a Gemini rising or like a Gemini sun, you got like a kind of like outburst personality. You're like, oh wow, okay. And that energy might be showing up for us. So there's definitely times that we're going to look at areas that we're going to want to get this energy out. If that's avoiding certain conversations, or practicing on stoicism, I would say sometimes being stoic is a virtue, because it's sometimes hard. But being able to express ourselves clearly and authentically. So definitely there's some areas of new moons that are centered around rituals. And the rituals that I would definitely say would for this new moon is writing, speaking, using intentions out loud. I would also really like to get intertwined with the energy of sound, that energy of the throat chakra, also the area of the mind, the area of movement that the Gemini brings. The Gemini is all about that movement of the mind and that movement of the throat chakra. So definitely the higher chakras I'm feeling for this moon, we definitely have the throat chakra and also the energy of the third eye chakra, testing our and staying truthful with our intentions and our areas of practices, and of course, the crown chakra. Another thing that we could do during this new moon is cleaning up our digital spaces, cleaning up maybe some of those extra projects that we just don't feel like we're going back to. Mercury is very much tied into technology, so I would be looking at areas of maybe deleting your 10,000 emails, deleting some of the notes that you just don't use, or the old projects that you're just not going to go back to, and starting with some new projects, maybe making a vision board, making out a map for the summer, all the social planning that you want to do for the summer. This is actually a good time with this new moon to really get tied into your areas of intentions and some of the social groups that you want to look at for this summer, and also in areas of practicing wellness, as it is centered with the area of six. The area of six, a lot of times to me, is a fun, loving, ritual-based energy, and it harmonizes harmonious aspects of the energy of clarity, adaptability, and overall personal wellness. The energies of communication and expression and curiosity is going to be there. But let's look at the social connections that this Gemini new moon brings. And if you're somebody who really wants to get out there, enjoy this summer, enjoy this energy of spring as we are transitioning, I will say being social sometimes for some people takes some practice. It takes some patience and some self-awareness. It's kind of difficult in some ways to have that energy of creating connections and also being very practical, and also having confidence to get out there and put yourself out there. It's very hard for an introvert and also an empath. I feel like most of my listeners are probably a little bit close to being an empath and being very energetically sensitive in some spaces where too much energy, too much socialization can feel like, oh, a fucking chore. But we want to make it fun and we want to make people see who we really are. And we don't want to feel like we're hiding who we are. And we want to get into areas of social circles where we can really create bonds and friendships and have that area of consistency and connection. Remember, connection occurs over time, and connection doesn't always have to be perfect. There's a lot of times with friendships that you have to create that energy of comfort, create that energy of consistency. I often feel like sometimes I'm not a very good friend because I have a hard time staying connected with people. I have a hard time, and so do so many people, I have a hard time of keeping that friendship up, keeping that consistency of like, hey girl, let's do a hike, let's meet up, let's get a drink, let's, go for lunch, let's go for brunch, let's do all the things, right? We're not saying you got to do all the things every fucking weekend, but every once in a while you want to tap back in with those old friends, right? You want to tap back in with people you may have lost contact with, but you also want to meet new people. Meeting new people increases the energy of social networking and even the energy of certain connections. People love to talk about themselves, and people love to have a space to talk about themselves at. And sometimes one of the best ways to be somebody who is centered around good communication and that energy of the throat chakra is to also be a good listener, allowing others to express themselves. Remember, a lot of us are going through things. A lot of us are having challenges. A lot of us are having stressful weeks. A lot of us are having all these things that sometimes we just can't express, right? We can't express to our loved ones. We can't express to our husbands. We can't express to our wives. But having a friendship or a connection where you're able to express like, oh girl, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a real life sample. Oh girl, do you know this man had the nerve to tell me, why does the house look dirty? Like I didn't just work 40 hours. It's like, and then you need your friend to be like, the nerve of that man. Ooh, the nerve of that man. Honey, let's continue. So you want to ask your friends and you want to ask people who you're getting to know open-ended questions. Like, what has been the highlight of your week? What happened in your week that was fun, engaging, and were there certain situations that really like stressed you out? Like, how was your week, girl? Like, how was your week? Come on, let me know. Let me know. And your friends are going to love to have those conversations. They're going to love to have that area. Also, if you are just meeting somebody new, like for instance, you decided to go to an art class, maybe you've always been really wanting to get back into art, or you've been wanting to get back into areas of creativity, and you meet somebody in this class, you can ask them like, where did your joy for this start, or what made you decide to pick this topic, or what made you decide to stand up to start this class? So we also want to be good listeners as well as good communicators, right? We want to see that area of movement, especially around the throat chakra. Like I said, this energy with the Gemini is all about the throat chakra. So we're going to also want to speak to ourselves in areas of affirmations, allowing our voice to have value, allowing us to express ourselves with clarity and confidence. We're going to be centered around definitely the energy of stones like the lapis lazuli and the blue lace agate. We're going to definitely want to drink warm tea, journal our thoughts. Sometimes we need to journal our thoughts before certain events occur. So for instance, let's say we're going to hang out with girlfriends, and maybe we want to journal our thoughts about this social event, right? Maybe we want to journal about like what it is that we want or what it is that we plan on being more engaged with. I plan on setting up more social time around hikes with my girlfriends. I plan on during this time really getting to know how my friends have been doing in their relationships. I want to express myself about certain adventures that I have coming up. So, really kind of seeing where it is that you want to take this communication with your friends. We also have to lean into the energy of curiosity that isn't centered around judgment. I'll be honest, and many of you guys know, I am a Gen X. So, I'm in my 40s, a little close to 50 than 40s. And I would say that, sometimes when I meet women close to my age, I get a little bit, I don't know if I would say insecure, but I get a little bit like, oh, they're going to think I'm weird kind of energy. Like, oh gosh, I already know that these fucking broads are going to think I'm weird. Because not all women, and especially in the social circles that I'm in, not all moms are really centered around like spirituality, astrology, the energy of alchemy. And sometimes I feel like I'm already starting to like judge myself before they get a chance to even like judge me. Especially like if it's somebody who doesn't like know me, and they're like, what's your Instagram handle? Or let me tag you in this picture. What's your Instagram? And of course, they're going to think it's my name. I'm like, oh no, girl. That would be too easy. That would be too fucking easy. Yeah, my Instagram handle is at Chakras Cusswords. They're like, this bitch is weird. And they see, and I'm like, literally have 20 zillion reels up about astrology and zodiac signs. And I'm like, I sometimes give people like a little fair warning. I'm like, look, I know we're a little bit different. I know we have like different energy. If you want to follow me, totally follow me. If you decide this is too much for you, I get it. Unfollow me, girl. But I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing for any of these people's approval. So we definitely want people to have a awareness of who we really are, because we don't want to have to confine ourselves for approval of certain areas of judgment. And people who like you will like you. People who like you may like you and might not necessarily like certain things or certain situations, talents, or hobbies that you talk about, but they might like you as a person, right? That doesn't mean that they have to be all intertwined with some of the things that you do on a hobby type level. I would say one of the things when we are looking at social rituals is to try to make a ritual where you are engaged with your higher self and you understand that area of being the archetype that you are. For instance, there's different archetypes in the areas of society and in the areas of social networks. Some of us could be a little piece of all of them, but the main ones that really stand focused to me is, are you a connector? Do you like to connect people to certain connections and certain, certain collectives? I would say I definitely have a friend who is a connector. She loves to introduce people to new people. She loves to get out there and hang out with all her girls. Me, I'm not necessarily a connector. I'm definitely more of a storyteller. Somebody starts to ask me about a story, honey, I could talk about a story for a good hour. They're probably like, oh my God, does she shut the fuck up? But that's who I am as an individual. I am very much that storyteller. I engage in tales and I'm rather pretty funny. So understanding that area of personality and archetype you have really brings out your area of communication with social networks. Another one is, Are you in that energy of being like the deep diver, the one with a little bit more depth? You like those really like personable, meaningful conversations? Don't get me wrong. I love a good one-on-one, like especially like my girls are going through some things or I'm going through something and I need to like talk it out with my girls and I'm just like, maybe I got some boohoo tears, maybe I'm super stressed. I love a good one-to-one, but that's not really me on a social network, but for some people, they are really like the deep diver. They are the one that you could tell like all your problems to and there's giving you that strength. They're giving you that reinforcement to continue to like go through it. Like me, you come to me with some problems, girl, I might tell you to key his car and shit. Like, I'm not the right one. You know what I mean? But not everyone is the same type. We could be little pieces of all of these things, but understanding where it is that you really communicate in your social archetype and your archetype skills really will help who you are. So getting tied into that higher level of consciousness and your higher level of your higher self in the area of being a connector, a storyteller, or even somebody who's really into that depth of communication, those deep communication skills, I would say would help in certain situations. Another thing that we want to do when we are like being centered around meeting new people and showing up for new events and getting intertwined into new social circles, even if you are an extrovert, if you're super introverted, or if you are just a little bit shy, and you're having a hard time meeting new people, there's a few things that you could do which really stand out. And it's been something that I've had to work on as well, is showing up at the same place. This could be a gym. This could be a coffee shop. This could be a bookstore. This could be a farmer's market. You start to build familiarity with going to the same place over and over. You start to create organic and authentic connections where people get to know you because they've seen you more than once. They've seen you more than twice. They've seen you more than 3 times and shit. They kind of like who you are. So they know your personality. You can create some friendships, especially around some of the same interests like hobbies. And getting engaged in these hobbies like poetry, yoga, astrology, becoming a speaker, right? If somebody is thinking about becoming a podcaster, you want to get into those social circles where you meet other podcasters. You learn to work on your language, your area of communication, your area of structure. Having these spaces that attract people with similar interests as you helps you create some good social circles. Also, hanging out with your friends, friends. Sometimes you'll meet like your new best friend. A lot of times I hear stories of how friends have met each other, and it's always by that connector, right? That archetype of the connector. So sometimes as the connector, you could be creating a lot of amazing friendships for other people. So having that ability to introduce new people to each other and also being somebody who's engaging with some of these new friendships or some of these new social circles. Also, another thing that you can do if you are trying to meet new people who have a lot of the same interests as you would be to volunteer or to get centered around community events. For instance, if there's like a community, a garden, and you've always wanted to garden, but maybe you don't have space in your backyard, you're going to want to get centered with meeting people in the garden co-op or meeting people in maybe your kids co-op or meeting people with some of the events of your children. I've met some great friends with the events from my children. For instance, soccer moms, football moms, we sitting by the bleachers, your guys are all sitting watching the kids, you get to know each other, you end up having some girls' nights, you end up, taking the kids on play dates and really creating a connection with other mothers or other people who have the same interests as you in the community really pays off. Also, you can join and volunteer at like animal shelters, local cleanups, or food banks, and you can meet people who have some of the same values as you. Another energy around that I really think is important for empaths, and also not just empaths, but also introverts and extroverts, is sometimes, one of the things that's so enticing about religion and about spiritual practices is that connection of being in a collective, being in the energy of a group. And a lot of times when we have these circles, when we have these collective spaces, we meet people like us. And these people have like the same intentions as us, right? They have the same energy that they're usually working through. So definitely reaching out, meeting some Reiki circles, some moon circles, some yoga circles, some meditation groups, some breath work workshops. Staying connected with people who have that area of deep connection around the spirit, around the energy of attraction for similar movements and connections, then to really have like deep connections. So I would say definitely being centered around certain meetup spots or certain Facebook events or certain astrology nights, healing sessions, creative gatherings really helps. And especially if this is like you're somebody who doesn't necessarily go to church, or you're somebody who doesn't necessarily have a spiritual collective, there are other areas of spiritual collections besides churches and besides areas of like temples. And if you're more centered around the area of spirituality, definitely look for like moon circles, healing sessions, creative gatherings, and even walking groups. Walking, I feel like it's very connected to the universe. Just walking, moving your body. If you have like a friend that you can walk with, hike with, it really helps open up that area of communication and collectiveness. Sometimes it really helps, right? Also, another thing that I would say, which I really have been kind of wanting to do, is like an open mic night or like a storytelling night, being centered around like emotional experiences, listening to other people's emotional experiences, and engaging in the areas of communication and learning to meet new people. Open mic nights are really cool, especially if you are somebody who is trying to work on their own communication skills. So while this new moon in Gemini is seen as like our cosmic reset and really getting centered around a start of a new energy that feels fresh, it feels centered around the right movement and feeling centered around being curious and being open-minded and having like these playful conversations, I definitely think that there's an energy of duality behind it. We have to talk about the energy of the twins, the energy of that duality, that the movement of the twins, of the movement of two sides really bring. So there's a couple stories that really like stand out to me when I think about the energy of duality. In one of the ancient Mayan creation stories known as the Popol Vuh, there are a story of two twin gods that to me resembles that energy of polarity and also that energy of duality and transformation, very similar to the Gemini archetype. These two twin gods, hero twins as some might say, Hunahpu and Shambhalanki, were the central figures that closely resembled the archetype of the Gemini. These hero twins were the son of gods and also mortal women. They embarked on a journey to the underworld, also known as the Sabala, where they lived and used wit and trickery and of course teamwork to defeat the lords of the death. in the area of the Pupavu, which is a Mayan creation story that is seen as the story of the energy of where gods created man. This energy eventually ascended to the heavens, and the energy of the Hunaplu and the Zabalaki soon to become the sun and the moon. Very different polarities, masculine and somewhat feminine, also light and somewhat dark. In some versions, they also traveled to be stars and planets, but the area of duality and transformation, and of course communication of the spiritual world, adapts in the area of the twins. Different but similar. While the Aztecs didn't have the same exact twin energy as the Gemini twin or the area of archetype, for instance, as the Mayan ancient script, there was a story of Quetzalcoatl and Zorro, which is basically the energy of light and in some ways dual forces of underworld. So Quetzalcoatl and Xolatl is the energy of two different movements. Quetzalcoatl is the god of light, wind, wisdom, and creation, where Xolatl, his twin, a god of the underworld, transformation, and death. They represent that energy of life and death, day and night, and the movement of Venus, a planet of both a civilization that was used to track. So during this time, the Aztecs tracked Venus. As you know, Venus is usually seen with sunrises, so they tracked this energy quite carefully. The themes that mirror this is that there's two beings, there's two entities, there's two energies that come from this collection. The energy of darkness, the energy of night, and the energy of movement with light. How we can use these energies of duality to find and be engaged in our movement of relationships and our movement of prosperity in this life. But when we think of the Gemini, the celestial twins of the Gemini, we can't deny Castor and Pollux. The energy of the poetic and emotionally rich Greek mythology is the tale that is woven through the stars. The themes of brotherhood, duality, and sacrifice really balances out the area of mortality and immortality in some aspects. So many are wondering, how does this energy of Castor and Pollux, also known as the Polydeuces, were the twin sons of Leda, but they had different fathers, which makes their story so much more mystical and symbolic in the energy of duality, and as some might see, opposites. Castor was the mortal son of Tiberius, the king of the Sparta, where Pollux was the immortal son of Zeus, bound by the energy of Jupiter in Roman mythology, who seduced Leda in the form of a swan. So same mother, but different father. This odd percentage meant that only Pollux had divine immortality, while Castor was bound to the human world. They were also known as half-brothers of Helen and Troy, which makes their stories in mythology kind of parallel. But their adventures of the twins were also famous. Castor and Pollux were famed heroes, often called as Diosaures, meaning the sons of Zeus. They were skilled horsemen and warriors, Castor especially in the energy of horseback riding and swordsmanship, while Pollux was known for boxing. members of the energy of movement and difference. They were known to also rescue their sister Helen from the Athens when she was abducted. They were seen as inseparable, representing harmony, balancing between the divine and also the magical, and also the energy of the human and the energy of the gods. They had mind, body, and of course spirit form, as they all centralized the energy of the Gemini archetype. There was a tragic separation from these two brothers. One of the most famous parts of their story comes during a family feud with their cousin Idas and Latius. During a fight, Castor was killed and Pollux was devastated, pleaded with his father Zeus to bring Castor back or allow him to share his immortality so his twin could live forever. This act of love and loyalty moved Zeus. Zeus made a powerful decision. He allowed Pollux and Castor to share immortality, but not at the same time. He would spend half their time in the Olympus with the gods and the other half in the underworld with death. United, even if they were not always in the same realm. Finally, Zeus placed them in the sky as the constellation of Gemini, so they could shine together forever in the heavens to symbolize the brotherhood and the energy of devotion, their sacred bond of opposites, mortal and immortal, divine and human, earthly and heavenly, could still continue to live through the areas of dimensions and multiple skies. The mutual sacrifices and connections beyond life and death is the energy of movement and duality. Why this matters in the Gemini New Moon energy is because the Gemini is often linked as the energy of light, chatty clarity, the energy of mental quickness, and the area of revealing the myths behind the movement of what we see in the human form. The depth behind duality, the Gemini represents the twins within us, the energy of light, darkness, our human form, and also our divine form, our higher selves, lower selves, or mortal routines and immortal ideas. It asks us, how do we unite with that opposite, that twin within us? It also speaks to the loyalty of relationships, just like that Venus planet that had so much representation with the Aztecs, the energy that dances between individual ideas and identity and the deep connections. It is a center of peace and also tragic separation of how the movement of duality can also cause us to separate from ourselves. We have to remember that while this Gemini movement in the new moon feels to be a little bit of a tug and pull situation, it allows us to embrace who we are, the both sides of us, the sun and the light, the darkness and the shadows. I want to thank everybody for listening to Chakras and Cusswords podcast. I hope you have an amazing new moon in Gemini.